This is the 6.1 to 6.4 Math 7 review. We will be covering changing numbers into decimals, fractions, and percents, comparing those numbers, ordering those numbers from least to greatest, as well as using the percent proportion or the percent equation to solve a percent problem. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first slide, it says for us to write the percent as a decimal. So when we're taking a percent and writing it as a decimal, we move our decimal place twice to the left. So our first problem here, this 31 and 25 hundredths of a percent, we're going to take that decimal and we're going to move it twice to the left. So our answer, 0, and we've got 3125. That's our answer as a decimal. Same idea goes for our second problem. We're moving our decimal place twice to the left. Even if our beginning number has a decimal in it, our beginning percentage, you still move that decimal twice to the left. So even if it was a number like 48%, we're going to take that decimal, it's at the end, move it twice to the left. It would be 48 hundredths. Okay, so let's go ahead on to our second set of problems. It says write the percent as a decimal again. We're going to take our decimal, move it twice to the left. So 0 and 43 hundredths. Here, even though it's above 100%, still move the decimal twice to the left, and we get 1 and 58 hundredths. Next one, say write the decimal as a percent. So we're going to go backwards. Now we're actually moving our decimal twice to the right. So here we take our decimal place, move it once, twice. We actually have 0.8% for this one. You can always have a decimal in your percentage as an answer, so that shouldn't worry you guys. We've got 1 and 82 hundredths. We're going to move that decimal twice to the right. We get 182%. And then our last one on this slide is 9 hundredths. We're going to move that once, twice to the right, and we get 9%. Our next set of problems order the numbers from least to greatest, and we want to show or explain our method. So here, explaining, you can write sentences if you want to describe what you did, or showing your work would be just maybe changing your numbers into different forms. So I'm actually going to change all of these numbers into decimals. I've already got 2 that are in decimal form, so I'm going to change my 1/4 into 25 hundredths, and then I'm also going to change this percent, moving my decimal place twice to the left, so I get 22 hundredths. When I order these from least to greatest, I want to make sure that I put them in their original form. So my smallest number, since I've got 3 digits behind my decimal in the first 2, I'm actually going to add zeros here so it's easier for us to compare. My smallest number is actually 22%. So 22% is going to be my first number in my list. I'm going to cross that out. Then I've got my 221 thousandths. And I've got 222 thousandths. And lastly, I've got 1/4. So I'm putting them in their original form, even though I needed to turn those into decimals to see where they would be put in that list. Here it says, the table shows the results from 8 teams competing in a scavenger hunt. Which team collected the most items? Which team collected the fewest? So here you're actually answering 2 different questions. Which team collected the most? And then also which team collected the fewest. So 2 different answers. Again, we're comparing our numbers here. So you can either change them all into fractions, change them all into decimals, and change them all into percentages, whatever you think is easiest. Go ahead and pause this video, work these problems out. There's 1 through 8. You're gonna have to change a few of those, so it's gonna take a little bit of time. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how I changed my numbers, and then we can answer the question. So I decided to turn all of my values into decimals. I felt like for me that was just the easiest. You may have decided to go a different route, which is totally fine. The 2 fractions that I had to change, I had to do some division. So I had to do 29 divided by 40 as well as 63 divided by 80. Now that I've got all of mine in the same form, I can answer my questions. So my first question is, which team collected the most items? So I'm going to look for the number that's the largest. And in my list, that's actually this one here. So team 4 collected the most. And then for my second question, it asks which one collected the fewest. So I'm looking for my smallest amount, which is here. So team 6 collected the fewest. So once my numbers are in the same format, it's easier to compare their values. So we're going to go ahead and continue on. My next question is a word problem. It says, on a fishing trip, 38% of the fish that you catch are perch. Write this percent as a decimal. So we're going to take our 38% and turn that into a decimal. And we need to move our decimal place twice to the left. So you get 38 hundredths. Okay, here, our next question says, you managed to hit 30 out of 35 baseballs in your last baseball game. Did you reach your goal of hitting 70%? Show or explain your method. I know I hit 30 out of 35 of the baseballs in the last baseball game. So I want to see if this is 70%. So there are a couple ways we can go about this. Go ahead and pause this video again. See if you can figure out whether or not you reached your goal of 70% based on the information that you are given. So because I really can't change 35 into 100 easy, I'm actually going to look at 30 and 35 and see if I can simplify it. So I can divide both of these by 5 just to see if I get anything easier. Nope, I still get 6/7. So again, not the easiest to turn into denominator of 100, but I can now divide 6 divided by 7, and I've got smaller numbers, so that may be a little bit easier for me to handle. So I've got 7 going into 60 8 times, which is 56. I've got 4 left over. Now I could continue my long division, but I know that my percentage is going to be 80 something. Well, I'm trying to get my goal of 70. This kind of already shows me that I've reached my goal, but I'm going to continue on at least one more decimal place so I can make sure. But 7 goes into 45 times, and that's 35, 5 left over. So again, this is going to be at least 85%, a little bit more than that. So yes, we did meet our goal. Okay, our last section is writing a proportion or an equation to solve the question that's given. So it says 23 is what percent of 300? I'm actually going to set up a proportion for this one. So 23 is my part of 300 is my whole. I'm going to set that equal to x because I don't know what percent over 100. So again, there's a couple ways you can try and solve a proportion. Here, I'm actually just going to do cross products. So I've got 23 times 100 is 2300. X times 300 is 300x. Now I need to solve for x, so I'm going to divide both sides by 300. And when you take 2300, divide by 300, you get something that isn't a nice even number, unfortunately. But since it is a percentage, we're just going to kind of estimate here. So we're going to go ahead and round. When I do 2300 divided by 300, I actually get 7, and then that 6 repeats. But since I need this to be a percentage, 7.6 repeating is not labeled, so we need to make sure we put 7.6 repeating percent. If you were to round, 7.7% would be. When you're given questions on your test, you're going to have numbers that actually go in nice and even. So you won't really have to worry about decimals or rounding unless you see directions that say so. I'm going to do one more problem like this, and instead of setting up a proportion, I'm actually going to use an equation this time, so at least you get one of each. So we're going to use the equation. It says what number is, which means equals 65% of multiplication 80. So what number, I'm going to put x is equals 65%. I need to turn that into a decimal. And then I'm going to multiply by 80. So I'm going to figure out what my x equals. So basically, all I'm doing is multiplying. So I've got 65 hundredths. I need to put my placeholder. 8 times 5 is 40. 6 times 8 is 48. 52 when you add that 4. 8 times 0 is 0. We're going to have 5 there. So we get 5,200 when we add. Now we've got 2 numbers behind our decimal place. So we move our decimals twice to the left. So you get your x to equal 52. Again, if you were to set up a proportion and solve this problem that way, you still should get your value of your variable to equal 52. So either proportions or equations work. Some of you may be more comfortable with proportions. Others of you may like equations better, or some of you may like to flip back and forth. So really choose the method that you feel most comfortable with. Either one is fine. This is going to conclude our review video, so make sure to rewatch any sections you need a little bit more practice with. Make sure you review notes and graded homework, and good luck studying.